If Captain America was recruited by the Division, this is the build he would use. This Deflector shield build comes with a secret that makes you immortal. Most agents don't know about this, but I'm going to share it with you today, and with it, you will clear heroic and legendary content fast and easy, even with all directives activated. This means it just might be the best build in Division 2, the Farm Global Event Red Stars, which you can use to purchase caches for the best loot in the game. Using this, I got over 50 Red Stars in a single session. Up next is the mission briefing for this week's Mission Impossible Challenge. Stick around after and I'll walk you through this recommended build. Morning, Agent. Your mission this week, should you choose to accept it, involves taking over 2 enemy territories by capturing all 7 of these control points. Agent, remember, not just any build will work, it's imperative you choose your build wisely. To complete this mission, you must have all 5 global directives activated, along with the reanimated global event. Use a pistol shield combo without revive hives, and complete the mission in a single session on heroic. As always, if you or any member of your force be caught or killed, the Division will disavow all knowledge of your actions. And Agent, if this happens, you must reset your control points and start over. You may select any 3 team members, but it is essential that you recruit at least 1 agent to complete this mission with you. Rendezvous at Tux's Discord to check in using codename Ricochet to be eligible for the Mission Impossible Challenge rewards. More details will be waiting for you there. You can also do the same on Tux's Twitter. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds. Thank you to everyone who participated in last week's Mission Impossible Challenge. This week's is one you don't want to miss. That's because the build and challenge is going to help you farm global event red stars so you can use them to purchase those named item caches from the season vendor while it's open. If you don't know why buying named item caches are a great idea, I suggest you watch this video that explains how you can get Dark Zone exclusive. So this build is centered on the Deflector shield, which is a really cool shield. I've never fully invested a build into this shield because it sort of disappointed me in the
cannot avoid it. So you're not only sending those bullets back, but you're also not taking damage. Now, when you have this shield equipped and you're facing an elite, they tend to aim for your head a lot more often. So in the past, or with other builds, that's a big problem. You're not going to be able to take that sort of damage. But with this build, that's not going to be a problem. So before we leave the shield and go on to the rest of the build, let me just make sure you know how to use this, because if you don't, it can be quite frustrating. So now that you know non-elites are shooting at the shield and elites are shooting at your head more often, what you want to do is eliminate the elites first. That makes sense, right? Right. But of course, elites are a little bit tankier. Now this build is going to be able to take some pain. We'll get into that in a minute. But what I want you to understand is your targeting priorities. So there's that little square reticule in the middle of your screen. That's where you're going to deflect the damage to. When you have a squad of enemies in front of you and it's a mixed crowd of non-elites and elites, what you want to do is send all that non-elite damage to the elites first and then take out the non-elites. If you don't do it this way, then you are truly surrounded. You'll end up taking too much damage to the head and you may or may not survive it. I mean, it just depends on how your build ends up in the end. Now, the other thing that's really important with this shield is that you don't let anybody get behind you. Now that might seem obvious, but what I'm suggesting you do and how I created this build is to really get you out and in there as much as possible. Again, this build scales with the level of threat, so you're going to be at your strongest when you have the most amount of enemies possible within your 15-meter radius. Now, you are going to get shot from the back. That just happens, and this build is prepared for that. But you can only take so many shots at the ass before you're eventually going to plop down on the ground. And that honestly is true for any tank build out there, no matter what gear set or pieces you're using. So keep your eyes open, have good situational awareness, and don't let anybody flank behind you. And when I'm using this build, there's plenty of times where I'm putting out some serious damage because I have 5 or 6 enemies in front of me. But when I see one guy flanking behind me, unfortunately I have to reset, because if he's back there pegging on me and I have all my directives on, so I don't have a mini map that tells me there's somebody behind me and I'm not sure where the bullets are coming from, I'll eventually get taken down. Now, I mentioned earlier in the intro that there's a secret that many agents don't know that basically makes you immortal when you're running this shield. Now, everything has its limits. You're not truly immortal, but relatively for this game, it's about as close to immortal as you can be. I mean, look at how much damage I'm taking with this build. It looks like I'm running a full-on tank build, but I'm actually only running 1.5 million armor, and I got 2 red cores here, and there's no memento if you've noticed. And this build is rated for legendary content as well. I even ran it at the Capitol building. I'll show you that gameplay in just a few. So although I have equipped the shield, I'm actually using it as my primary weapon. The shield itself, as far as defense goes, is not really what's keeping me alive when I'm surrounded like you see here in this gameplay. What's actually keeping me alive is my Shield system. Now, if you've been watching my build videos for a while, you've probably learned that I really like the Shield system for run and gun out of cover builds. And that's what we're doing here. So Shield is what it sounds like. It's comprised of multiple layers of defensive attributes that come together to create an invisible 360-degree shield. So that way you're protected from all angles, which is better than a hard shield that only covers your front. So with Shield, we are able to take a lot of damage. We're able to take those headshots from the elites. We're also able to take those shots in the back that we're trying to avoid, but we're able to take that damage and stand on our feet, and for the most part, stay at full armor while we're taking that damage. Now, earlier I mentioned we're at 1.5 million armor, which is kind of middle of the road. That's not really a lot for something like this that looks like, walks like, talks like a tank build. But remember threat scaling? Well, our damage output doesn't only scale with the number of enemies that are around us, but so does our armor. In fact, we go from 1.5 to 2.4 million armor when we have at least 3 enemies standing in front of us. And that's constantly refreshing. So they may take it down, but it's going to be back up in just a few seconds. So you have two weaknesses basically. One is explosions. A big enough explosion can take out your shield. Now you can build defense against this if you want to avoid that, but it just didn't happen enough to me where I felt like I needed that added layer of protection. So funny thing is, when you see a suicide bomber running at you, drop your shield. Actually, that will protect it. Take the damage to your body if you're going to take damage at all. Now, because of the DuraShield system, you're going to be able to withstand the damage and actually not die. You might even end up at full armor after you take the brunt of that force. That's because most of the time you have 900,000 in bonus armor. I mean, if you think about it, 900,000 bonus armor is like having a teammate with an all red build standing between you and that suicide bomber. Your second weakness is distance, so you don't want to fight from range. You need to get in the pocket of the enemies. Try to stay within 15 meters of the threats. Basically, all your survivability is based on you being within 15 meters of the enemy. Getting into the details of the build. First off, you want to run the Technician specialization, and that's because this is a skill build. It doesn't look like one, but it is. Technician gives us a free skill tier, and we need that. A shield is a skill, right? And it can be a skill tier 6, which is max, based on how many blue armor cores you have and how many yellow skill tier cores you have. This build has 4 armor cores for 1.5 million, which makes that shield a tier 4. Technician bumps it up to a tier 5. Are you with me? The other reason why we want Technician is for the specialization tree. It has the option for you to select 10% more skill damage. Now, the damage output, the deflection from the shield, is skill damage. So we want to spec in as much skill damage into this build as possible. Now here's something really unique and cool about this Deflector shield that most people don't actually think about. Now those 4 armor cores that are giving us armor and of course shield health are actually also giving us skill damage, deflector damage. So we have 4 blue armor cores, which makes this shield a tier 4 before our skill tiers, and so that gives us 40% more skill damage. And I think that's pretty cool because there's nothing else in the game that works that way. There's nothing else in the game where armor equates to more damage, only on this shield. Also on your specialization tree, make sure you have your pistol selected or maxed out for weapon damage. That's important because you're using that. The other reason why we want the Technician specialization is for this bad boy, the Artificer Hive. It's very important for this build. This is why we don't have to worry about the durability of our shield. The Artificer Hive takes care of that for us. So the way I have it set up now, we're getting 38% skill repair from the Artificer Hive to our shield. And the buff amount is 30% for 10 seconds per drone. So that means we're getting an additional 30% duration, 30% health, as well as 30% skill damage every time the Artificer Hive sends a drone to our shield, which is every 7 seconds. Now, the other thing that's really unique about the Artificer Hive is, well, we're running all directives, right? One of those is cool skills. So when we whip out the shield, it resets the Artificer Hive, right? Well, that's okay, because with the Artificer Hive, it actually buffs your skill while it's on your backpack. You don't actually have to equip it or drop it on the ground. And when it buffs your skill, it doesn't actually use one of the charges. It's like an extra drone that comes and heals your shield. So when it goes on cooldown, your Artificer Hive is only disabled for the refill speed of 5.1 seconds. That means it comes back faster than any other skill in the game without having to roll on skill haste. It's probably the best skill to have for cool skills or all directives. That, my friends, is why you don't have to worry about your shield health or regeneration. So 9 out of 10 times, the health of your shield will outpace the enemies in front of you. There were only a few times where the shield got outgunned. And one of those was when I was being tagged by the 3 mini tanks at the beginning of District Union Arena on Legendary. So yeah, I wouldn't try to face tank mini tanks at all, not with this setup. So we're watching Legendary gameplay right now on Capitol Hill, and this isn't group play, of course. The times the shield went down was due to the mini tanks, and that just didn't happen enough for me to adjust the build. This build is set up for majority heroic gameplay. Now, as you can see, it works just fine in Legendary. But if you want it to be godly in Legendary, you only need to make a few minor tweaks. And that's mostly so that you get more skill repair out of the Artificer Hide. That's just as easy as it sounds. Now you can add more skill repair either through mods or attributes, or you can add another skill tier, replace one of those armor cores with the skill tier. That will boost the Artificer Hide. Now my primary weapon is the TDI card custom. Now as far as mods, I have everything rolled onto headshot damage. And for the talent, I'm running Sadist. This is where I'm getting most of my handgun damage from. But the main reason why we're running this handgun is for that extra skill tier that you can only get by running this pistol. That skill tier gets our shield to a skill tier 6. So 4 tiers come from the 4 armor cores, 1 skill tier comes from the technician specialization, and the last one comes from this pistol. That frees up 2 core attributes for me to decide what to do with. Now for both of them, I decided to run more weapon damage. And for the mask, I'm running Punch Drunk, which is the named Douglas and Harding mask that gives us 20% pistol damage. It also gives us 20% more headshot damage. And I rolled skill damage on there so that we're getting more damage out of our shield, which is actually our primary weapon. And then I have 13% protection from elites. So every piece on the build should be somewhat of a rainbow, just like you see here. And if you watch my other build videos, you know when we achieve perfect rainbows, for some reason they end up being the most fun builds in the game. Just look at the Memento backpack. So I mentioned earlier you can step this build up for legendary content so that it's more godly in legendary content. Well, this is one of the pieces that you could change. You could actually take out Punch Drunk and replace it with something like Alp Summit or Bellstone. And what you're looking for is more skill repair or more skill damage. In this build, I've balanced out the damage coming out of the pistol a little bit with the damage coming off the shield. Now the shield is going to do more damage, so it's not a bad idea to spec all the way into skill damage for the shield. The reason why I did it is because there can be great rewards from the talent that is equipped with the pistol. For example, instead of running Sadist for 20% more weapon damage, you can run In Sync or Spike and get 15% more skill damage. Or you can run Reformation and get 30% more skill repair just for landing a headshot, which is really easy to do. As a matter of fact, that's all you're going to do with your pistol. And that would take your shield from heroic legendary to godly legendary level. 30% skill repair boost is a ton. Now you're not going to see it on paper, but it will kick in when you land a headshot with Reformation. I use that a lot with the TDI card. I recommend you give it a try on this build. The other thing I was running was Preservation on the pistol. It was sort of like an insurance policy. There's a lot of times where your shield damages the enemy, but then they sort of just stop shooting and stare at you like dummies. And then you end up finishing them off with your pistol. That happens a lot. And so with Preservation, since you're always going for headshots and they're really easy to get because the enemy's standing just like right in front of you, you're gonna get 20% armor on kill. That's actually really cool and a great thing to run in heroic content, especially solo. But if you're gonna do legendary content, for legendary, go for Reformation because it doesn't take time to kill into consideration. Okay, listen closely because I don't know if you caught this in the gameplay you've been watching so far. So the chest piece I'm running is Ridgeway's Pride, and that comes with the talent Bleeding Edge. Now real quick, I have 13% protection from Elite's mod on there, and I'll get more into that in just a few. But Bleeding Edge basically gives you armor regeneration depending on how many enemies are standing in front of you. Now for us, most of the time, we're gonna have 4 or 5 enemies standing in front of us. So that's 750,000 armor back per second. And that's one of the reasons why we're able to not only survive, but why we're motivated to throw ourselves into the horde of enemies, because we actually get stronger the more of them that are around us. If we're standing in front of one enemy, but we got 4 enemies 25 meters out all shooting at us, that's a bad situation. We don't want to be there. We always want to be moving and we want to push that enemy back, the one who's standing right in front of us, 10 meters so that we're within that 15-meter mark of those other enemies who are shooting at us. Now we can spread the love, get them all bleeding, and push our armor regeneration up to 48%. That's part of how Invisishield works. That's also how threat scaling works. The greater the threat, the more vicious we become. Now here's where the pro tip comes in, the secret about this shield and this chest piece that not a lot of people know about. That is, they synergize together, and what I mean is that the deflection applies the bleed from Ridgeway's Pride. So you're getting that 48% armor regen back without actually shooting your gun. You're getting it when the enemies that are shooting at you. Think about that for a second. You're getting 48% armor regen when enemies are shooting at you. You don't have to do anything. You just have to stand there and you get 48% armor regen. Just deflect those shots into the crowd and you're getting that armor regen. And that's why you're basically immortal with this shield build. The enemies are doing all the work for you. They're killing each other for you and they're giving you the survivability that you need just by coming into your 15-meter zone. Now for that damage that does sneak by the shield, those shots that are coming at your head and your back, Invisishield or Adrenaline Rush are protecting you from that. Rather, they're giving your armor regen enough time to heal you. I mean, you don't even really need a gun for this build. It's almost just a bonus. I mean, I do use it a lot, mostly because the enemies stop shooting at you and they're just staring at you. And so you're like, might as well finish them off. Now for the backpack, I chose Gila Guard. Now some of you might be thinking Bellstone, but 1% armor regen isn't going to matter to you when you have 48% already. So what we need is more armor, and the reason why that 5% armor matters is mostly because it's making that armor regeneration mean something greater per second. In fact, it means we're getting a little more than 35,000 more armor back per second than if we just did 1% more armor regeneration, which would only be 15,000 armor back per second. Now, if we were playing in cover, that passive armor regeneration from Bellstone would be helpful, but since we're not, since we're in the face of the enemy, the more armor we get back per second, the more damage we can take per second. Does that make sense to you? So you see I have repair skills and armor regen and more protection from elites, and for the talent I have adrenaline rush, and that again is threat scaling. It's giving us up to 60% of our armor, again taking us up to 2.4 million armor when we have at least 3 enemies standing in front of us, and it's constantly refreshing, every 5 seconds in fact. Now with the Deflector shield, and because we're running Ridgeway's Pride, you have a ton of options here. And I mean a ton. You can run Shock and Awe, which is going to give you 20% more skill damage and skill repair. So that's going to make your shield super powerful, both in the output and damage and how much damage it could take, because it's also boosting the Artificer Hive, which is boosting the shield. So you can double boost there. Think about that for a second. That's multiplicative. That's a lot of damage and repairs you're getting out of that. You can also run Wicked and get more damage out of that pistol. You can even run Combined Arms and get up to 30% more skill damage off of that shield. And I tried that. The shield shreds with that. Okay, but let me level with you. I ran all of those. As a matter of fact, I ran so many different configurations on this build because it was so much fun and there were so many possibilities. I had to try it all. Lots of combinations out there. I even tried Foundry Bulwark, and this setup is better, trust me. But more important, Adrenaline Rush is the best talent for the backpack. That is, if you're running the Deflector shield, and that's because you take a lot of damage. One, because you're surrounded by a ton of enemies, but also because those elites are constantly aiming for your head over the shield. Now they do hit the shield, I don't know, something like 60% of the time, but the other 40% of the time they're shooting at your head. And you're also taking damage from the sides and from the back. This isn't a bulwark shield. It's a lot smaller, right? So you are exposed. And from what I can tell you, Adrenaline Rush offers the most amount of survivability, mostly because it improves depending on the level of threat that you have in front of you. Now, if you do run Shock and Awe or Wicked on your backpack, you can compensate by putting Preservation or Reformation on your pistol. Tomatoes, it's just that Adrenaline Rush is that much more passive than those talents on your gun. Now my knee pads and gloves are both improvised, and mostly because I want more protection from elites on this build. Now you need to be at least 60% protection from elites. a little bit more than the average that we run for heroic, which is sometimes 50% protection from elites. Now the reason why you need more is because those elites are going to be pegging you in the face a lot more because of the shield. Now skill damage is a must. You definitely want that on every piece that you can, but armor regen and headshot damage are both options. You can actually go for more skill repair if you want your shield to be stronger, and again, godly legendary mode. And actually, a lot of my pieces have armor regeneration on them, and I really would prefer I didn't have that. They're not actually doing much for me. All the armor regeneration, again, that we need is coming from the chest piece. So I way rather have skill repair or headshot damage in there instead of that armor regen. If you want to experience the Division 2 in more exciting and interesting ways, then join us on my Discord and Twitter. We're always up to some sort of shenanigans, and I hope to see you there. Now the holster is special. It's the Claws Out, which is the named wire and wear holster that comes with 500% melee damage, 10% skill damage of course because it's wiring, as well as 9% pistol damage. Now this one had skill damage already on it, so I just changed the core attribute to armor. So hopefully you have this. Now if you don't, that means you're not watching my recommended buy list for the vendor reset, which I do every Tuesday. Last week, this was for sale. If you don't have a Claws Out, one way you can get it is just by continuing to farm for those red stars and purchase named item caches from the seasoned vendor. Then, keep your fingers crossed, you can get the Claws Out. If you don't want to run Claws Out here, you actually have a lot of alternatives. You can run Providence and get more headshot damage, Walker and Harris for more weapon damage, the Forge holster for more shield health, Alp Summit for more shield repair, or an unnamed wire and wear holster with skill damage and skill repair on it. Any of those that are buffing the shield are great for legendary. Here are the stats. There's not much to look at, but do note we have 63% protection from elites. And in fact, one of the other options for your holster is another improvised piece, and you could jump this up to 75% protection from elites if you put another protection from elites mod on that. For a backup weapon, I have the Sweet Dreams equipped for the talent Sandman. If you got a real tanky or annoying purple in your way, you can just swipe right. If you prefer boring builds without survivability, then don't watch these two videos next. Tuxedo out.